Thank you, Nikki. That was fantastic. And I had my own questions keep popping into my head throughout it, but we certainly could not have a Future is Now 2025 conference without talking about Gen AI to some degree. So we appreciate your time and expertise coming here. And I don't think you and your expertise will be replaced by a robot or AI too soon, no matter how people try. Um, During this town hall session, just like the other ones, people, please throw your questions in the Q&A tab, and I'll do my best to pull them in and talk about them. I think we have a lot of people in this audience that are probably at different stages in exploring these types of tools, with many maybe haven't dived in at all whatsoever. But yet, Illinois here is one of the 40 states that have adopted the competency for technology, which started it in 2012. It was Nikki. You were right when you first started. So what do you tell those people? What are good places for them to start to dip their toe in, at least to understand, as we're required under Common 8 at least, the risks and benefits of relevant technology, even to begin to know AI? Because it seems very different than learning email or learning the internet. This is a very different creature. What are your thoughts, besides attending great sessions like this?
Well, what I always tell people is that I think of, I personally use ChatGPT Plus, and my company also has ChatGPT Teams. So I have access to two different accounts, both of which are accounts that are paid for. So there are controls in terms of data that's shared. But I use ChatGPT all the time. I think of it as a personal assistant that sits on my shoulder, that really, really wants to be helpful, and that sort of has a pathological lying problem. So you have to keep that in mind when you use it. But I find that anytime in my personal or professional life, when something comes up where I need a deep dive I need more information, or it's something where I think, oh, I'm not sure I want to deal with this right now. I'm going to back burner this and get to it later. I'll stop myself and I'll ask myself, can ChatGPT do this now? Can it help me get this off my virtual desk so they don't have to bother with it anymore? And more often than not, the answer is yes. And it can be, there's a wide variety of things that I use it for and that anyone can use it for. I recommend you subscribe to the $20 version of ChatGPT Plus so that you can control the data sharing functionality, and also so you have access to the latest versions, and you just use it for a month. And so you have it there available to you, and don't input any confidential information. But anytime you want to, you have a difficult conversation coming up to talk to a client or an employee, you can ask it to analyze the letter or analyze the email you're about to send, assuming it doesn't have confidential information, or provide you with a roadmap to help you deal with this difficult conversation. And it's like having a coach there with you. It takes all of the internet's information about therapy and interacting with people, and it can help you make this difficult conversation better so that the person that's receiving this information is more receptive. You can ask it to I use it for condolence things. It sounds awful, but I'm horrible at condolence letters, especially when it's someone who's close to me. And I've asked it to draft a condolence letter that I then tweak, make it my own, and it's so much better than what I normally would have written. And I've had people tell me that was such a sweet email. I read it to my kids, and I feel like a jerk a little bit. But I told my husband this. He's like, "But you helped them feel better, and so you really aren't such a jerk." So I help it for. You can use it for that type of thing. You can help use it to summarize a long document to help you kind of dive, or like a study to dive into it, to get a summary of it ahead of time before you really dive into the meat of it. I help it pair wine with my meals. I ask it to, I have these many ingredients, help me come up with a meal or a recipe. There's so many things that I use it for. And that if you just sign up for the paid version of ChatGPT or whatever your preferred, I just recommend ChatGPT Plus because that's my preferred one. But, and just always just plan to use it 3 times a day. Spend an hour a week using it across the board over 4 weeks, not inputting confidential information, just to get a sense of what it can do. Ask it to draft a demand letter in a personal injury case. Just all these different things that even if you already have a demand letter, ask it to draft one, compare it, and see how good it did. I think you'd be surprised.
Yeah, and I love the change in perspective on how you address an issue, whether it's writing a sympathy card or what you're going to make for dinner. the continued conversation you have with the tool is so different than our traditional internet searching, right? Can you speak on that a little bit, and why that's important to get used to?
Well, so ChatGPT now has, like most of the other tools, it will give you sources for especially depending on the type of query. When you're asking for a type of information, it realizes you're asking for information and it will provide you with sources for its answers. Um, and so I have found that Google has become such trash because it's full of SEO spam. And when you try to get information now, all that appears at the top is whoever's spent the most money to create crap content, really. And so it's so not useful. I can never find the information I need on Google unless it's a business's name, you know? So I use ChatGPT as my first search effort. Whether it's a health related issue, whether, we have 3 dogs. 2 of them are senior dogs, but we have a new puppy who's 9 months old now. Whenever anything happens with this puppy, I constantly ChatGPT knows her name. ChatGPT knows all about what's happened to her. And well, if I ask about a black lab, it'll respond and say Mochi, even if I don't mention her name, like it knows who this dog is. But whenever I have issues with Mochi, I ask ChatGPT about it because not only does it give you the answer, but then you can do these deep dives, like you mentioned. Mark, you can be like, well, so do you mean I should do this or this? Or would you recommend I handle it this way or that way? Or how long should I wait until I call the vet? And it provides a ton of information and it provides you with the sites too. So if you think it's, and you can also say, are you sure that's accurate, and call it out, and it will correct itself sometimes, not always, but it
Yeah.
will. So it's a fantastic tool.
Yeah, I noticed one thing that caught my ear. When you were talking about using it as case analysis, you specifically said you can upload a PDF for it to tell you about that case. You did not say you can just enter a citation or a case name and have it do that. And I think that was a clear and important distinction, because you're probably going to get much more accurate results giving it the actual content than having it go find what it thinks may or may not be the right content, right? And that leads to a question I saw, I think it was from Anthony, that talked about his specific question was, will this kind of change how you brief cases in law school? But I'll turn that into maybe even a broader question: is how will this change possibly how law students learn, or how we educate the future lawyers? Besides the need to absolutely get them educated on these tools, how will it change the overall legal education process? Maybe. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, will it change how law students brief cases? It already is. They already use it, and I know this because when we were at ABA Tech Show a couple weeks ago, we were both there. I was walking around the expo hall, and there was a booth, 2 booths right next to each other that were the same people running them, and they were a bunch of law students. I can't remember which law school they were at, but one of their tools was targeted to law students, and one was targeted to lawyers. I can't remember what the legal one did for lawyers, but the law student one briefed cases, and it provided some other functionality too. But he's like, they're already doing it, and so this one's actually fine-tuned to help them brief cases. And I said, well, that just doesn't seem like you need to brief the cases. That's how you learn in law school. And he said, well, they're still learning. They're doing it anyway. This way, we give it to them for free, but this way they get more accurate results, and it helps them better prepare for class and learn the issues better. And I probably could have debated him on that all day, but they're already doing it, right? And just like legal research, when I'm old enough that when I was in law school, we were right on the cusp of, we still had to learn books, and I had to learn how to shepherdize in books, but we were starting to do online research with CD-ROMs. And then from there, it became online research with entering your login. But I don't think that spending 25 minutes trying to shepherdize a stupid case was a good use of my time, right? I think that was just a bunch of grunt work for no reason, and online research got rid of that. You don't have to worry about that. You just click a button and you can much more quickly figure out the validity of this particular
You see a
case.
red flag or not, right? Yeah.
Yeah, right. Like, I don't think I think that improved research. I think that the ability to conduct legal research online, and now with generative AI built in, it gets you to the cases so much quicker than doing the book research. So I never really felt that doing the research in the books helped me understand the law better or something. It just led me down weird little paths and took a really long time and kept me cooped up in the law library. I think generative AI is going to be a lot the same way, and they're just going to learn differently. They're still going to
Mhm.
learn all the information they need to learn, I
Yeah.
think. I see the
Yeah.
same thing with my Gen Z kids in college. you know?
Yeah, you purposely said they're already doing it. And I think that's so true. That's also true in the law offices, right? Whether it's the lawyers themselves or the paralegals or any legal professional in that office, even the assistants are using it probably in some way, whether they know it or not, many times as well. So I don't know if you brought this up, but what about the need or necessity or the best practice of having an AI policy in your organization? Where do you think we stand right now? And what advice would you have for the attendees on that?
Well, it's interesting because I didn't do a deep dive into the slide, but our data in terms of personal use versus law firm use showed that personal use had increased 4 percentage points from last year's survey. Law firm use had actually declined by 3 percentage points. And my theory about that is because law firms need to choose the right tool and they have to roll out policies about properly using these tools in their firm. And that takes time, right? To choose the right tools and then to create these policies and then to train everybody on those policies. My company has done the same thing, right? Our legal team created policies and then we have to do AI training every year to make sure that we review the policies, we understand the policies, we're using the tools that are approved by the company. And law firms need to do the same thing. So I think that's partly why you're seeing that short, very small decline. But I think law firms are kind of paused. The employees are using their own tools and they may not be authorized by the firm, and that's why it's increasing. But within the firms, they need to make decisions about how they're going to handle these tools in the firms and which tools that are going to be rolled out firm wide. And so that's why I think they're still researching and the tools are still improving very quickly. So I think the firms have that obligation, and I think most of them understand that, which is to create policies, to train on those policies, and to ensure that there's compliance with the chosen tools within the firm. And I think you have to do that if you're going to have an official green light within your firm of using these tools. And the faster you do it, the better, because they're already using them. It's pretty clear.
Yeah. Let me continue my attempt at success at transitioning questions very well. Maybe not as good as Bob and Brogy can do on this podcast, but let me take that policy right into the policy outward facing with your clients. You know, early on we had questions of client authority or client consent or client transparency, if nothing else, of using the cloud many years ago. And now we have another advent of a new technology here that lawyers want to use. Some are hitting the pause button still because they're not being told one way or the other for their client, whether the client wants them to use it or even if their client wants them not to use it. So where do you see that fitting into this formula?
I think that with every single new technology that rolls out, starting with email, some bar association ethics committees will weigh in when it starts to get to that tipping point where everybody's using this tool and it's pretty clear it's going to be a tool that's used in law firms. They always issue opinions that say you need to get client consent and put it in the retainer agreement. And that's happened every single time. And over time, as it just becomes ubiquitous, that requirement goes away because it's just part of doing business. It's part of practicing law. That happened with email. That happened with the cloud, and it's going to happen with generative AI. You've already been using it and you don't know it. AI has been built into the legal research tools you're using for years. So I think that it's a red herring. It's a misnomer to expect people to do that. And I think it's going to go away pretty soon, that requirement.
To carry that into the billing aspect you mentioned, you know, do you see actual impact, let's call it, with the billable hour? Is this going to be another death blow to the billable hour? And if so, how will that happen? Will it be more client driven, that the client's going to end up, trying to find the attorney who uses this to save them money, and if they don't do it, they'll go find an attorney who will? Are we to that point yet, or is that somewhere down the road?
Well, that's one of my most favorite things to debate with my legal tech colleagues,
Uh-oh.
to the journalists. I think this may be like the death knell of the billable hour. I know everyone said that for years and years, but I think it may finally happen now. But I'm starting to think it's going to happen slower than I expected it would, because I really thought that in-house counsel would be one of the drivers behind it, because when you have a sophisticated legal consumer, in their case, in-house counsel's the sophisticated legal consumer for law firms. The same way that insurance companies are sophisticated consumers for some law firms that handle their matters. When you have a sophisticated legal consumer that knows that when you charge them 4 hours for a certain task, that they know because they've used generative AI that if in their own practices or just on their own, they know that if you'd used generative AI, it would have taken half the amount of time. They can start putting pressure. Or one thing that's happening is they're using it, and this is, I've talked to in-house counsel, they're already doing this. They're using it to narrow down the issues that they want to hand off to external counsel, to outside counsel, to reduce the amount of time they have to spend honing down that issue externally. So they're already saving time in that way. But in terms of general counsel actually adopting these tools, it's been slower than I had expected. They've been actually one of the slower segments of the legal population to adopt these tools. So, but I think what's ultimately going to happen is that if you know that it'll take an hour to do this instead of 4, and outside counsel keeps billing you 4 hours, you switch to some other outside counsel firm that's using generative AI and providing you with what you think are reasonable fees. So it's going to create, and it's going to, I think it's going to start in those environments, but sooner rather than later, sooner rather than later, general legal consumers are also going to understand that this is, there's going to be these price pressures put on lawyers by them as well. And so I do think that at some point you're going to see people using generative legal clients across the board requiring generative AI to be used to reduce their costs, and that's going to ultimately lead to better, to more AFAs, more alternative fee arrangements. And the other thing that's going to drive that is generative AI, where I referenced earlier about using your legal billing data to help you make smarter billing decisions, to help you figure out what would be a profitable flat fee. When you start to be able to do that, it's going to make it so that you can be more competitive in the legal marketplace, where you have these clients putting these pricing pressures on you, where you can actually roll out profitable flat fees. And if you're doing that before anybody else is, it's going to help you undercut your competitors. So I think it's a really interesting time. It's not happening quite as quickly as I thought it might, but I think that it will be within a year or two. You're going to start to see that really happening in the marketplace. But we'll see. Some of my colleagues completely vehemently disagree, and no one thinks you can kill the billable hour completely. They're right about that, but I think it's going to be a reduced way of billing over time.
Yeah. I want to return to a question that was actually asked in a previous session, so I don't think you were here for it, Nikki, but it's actually relevant to this section, and that was from Matthew Kurbis, who I know you know. He posted that lawyers are not always the most empathetic bunch. Interesting that some reports show that AI chatbots can actually appear more patient and empathetic than lawyers can at times. How can lawyers use AI tools to have more client-centric practice? That was more relative to the discussion at that time, but you get the gist. Is there a benefit possibly to integrate how we communicate with our clients, maybe better, smarter, and more empathetic?
Well, absolutely. One thing that I do, I'm asked to speak often, and every once in a while, they will ask me to provide a demo. And when it comes to, I will usually, the only legal tool that I have access to, because it's expensive, that has AI built into it, is obviously my company's tools. So I'll sometimes, when they specifically ask me to do it, I'll do a very short demo that happens to be in my case. And what we have in my case is a tone changer. You can change the tone of the text. And one thing that I'll often do is I have I'll cut and paste a text in there that says, hey man, someone just, hey dude, you missed court. Bench warrant's been issued. You better run, or pay, you better show up and, pay the bail or run. And so then I ask it to change the tone, and you can ask it to make it professional. And it does a great job of suddenly making this, note where you scratched it out really casually, professional. You can have it make it more empathetic. So instead of just saying, a bench warrant was issued, we appeared in court, you'll probably want to pay it, it'll say, it's unfortunate that a bench warrant's been issued, and I can understand why this might distress you. It throws in all this additional verbiage. So, and a lot of different companies in legal tech are rolling out that type of functionality already. But it can be great to, lawyers are historically bad. I've done presentations internally in my company about lawyer personality, and there have been studies. We are a cynical bunch. We we don't have we have less empathy than the general population. We're very analytical. And so when we deliver bad news, we often get mired in the facts and we think of it as a shield. I think we're just the facts. We're just giving you the facts. And so we get very factual and specific. And your client needs you to provide some of that empathy that precedes it, to let them, I know this is unfortunate. I know this isn't what you expected or what we'd hoped for. And so you can, type out what you think you want to say to your client and ask the tool, any tool really, as long as it doesn't have confidential information in there, to provide an empathetic approach, either to actually take that email or letter and make it more empathetic, or else give you a roadmap for a more empathetic approach in that discussion, like how to preface the conversation with your client before you do that deep dive. Or with employees, difficult conversations with employees. It's a really so it can help you be more client-centric, and that way it can help you be more client-centric in terms of pricing and more client-friendly, predictable pricing. And it can also help you be more responsive because it's built into the tools. Oftentimes you put off drafting an email or responsive, something that's responsive because A, the information is not in front of you, or you don't want to worry about drafting it right now. You want to have a little more time to focus. But if you have it built into your practice management software, or your document management software, or your email, you're using Outlook or whatever, and there's Copilot, you can ask it to pull the information from within the confidential, gated system about the case and the most recent status update, and ask it to draft a status update to your client, like about, you may have dictated a note to the file about what happened in court. You can ask it to pull that note from the file and dictate a status update for the client that is empathetic or that is otherwise, meets the tone that you want. So you can respond much more quickly rather than putting it off, and also in a more empathetic way. So there's a host of ways that it really is going to ultimately help lawyers become more responsive.
Yeah, I'm glad we brought that up. Another area I don't want to forget to mention is access to justice. People have said that this is certainly not the pure solution to it, but this could have new avenues to address the ongoing need for underrepresented individuals or underrepresented litigants, especially when there's an opposing party with representation. What's your reaction to impacts on that need?
Well, I've always been cynical. That's another trait of attorneys that most lawyers have. I think I may have said that previously, but I'm cynical. And I've always been cynical about companies. Most companies that claim their tools bridge access to justice, or that they're created for access to justice, not all, but most, in my opinion, are often snake oil salespeople. And I always think that what I always say is capitalism trumps altruism. I think that in this late stage capitalism world that we live in, most companies exist solely for profit. And I'm ultimately cynical that AI is going to solve the access to justice. But I have been convinced over time, this is another hot point of debate amongst my legal tech colleagues and I, especially the journalists. I have been convinced, after we've debated it on stage a couple times, both from what they've said and what people in the audience have said to me, and I've written about it over time, and I've decided that there are different pronged approaches to bridging the access to justice gap, and generative AI fills in some of those bridges. I don't think it's a single bridge that's going to bridge the access to justice gap, but there are multiple ways that generative AI can chip away at it. So one of them is helping public assistance lawyers or assigned counsel attorneys or public defenders represent their clients more efficiently, more effectively, get work done more quickly so they can take on more clients and ultimately provide better representation. I've actually talked to lawyers for whom that has been the case. They've been able to take on more cases. It can also help litigants, often pro se litigants, obtain information about the court system more quickly. Learn from the court chatbots and stuff that are generative AI powered. Obtain information more quickly about how to work through the system on their own, how to file things properly, where to file it, and it can, or how to find an attorney even that may be like on a list that is provided by the court. So it can help in those ways. And then there are tools that do enable, a lot of it is trying to help people represent themselves. I think that you're ultimately going to need lawyers in the loop somehow to, just like you do oftentimes with, people create wills on LegalZoom, et cetera. And then when the wills actually get executed, when someone dies, there's all sorts of problems. Then a lawyer has to come in and help them figure out how to fix these problems that were not included in that will. Or when the executor, I don't know where they executed. I never practiced trust and estates law. Is that the proper terminology? But in any event, there's all sorts of ways that it can chip away at access to justice. But I don't think that we're going to get to this point where people don't need lawyers and lawyers aren't in the loop at all. And generative AI becomes the counsel to all these pro se litigants. I don't think it's going to solve that problem.
Yeah. Another group of attendees we have in the audience, I'm sure we have every year, and I saw some of them earlier, is the judiciary. Let's turn to them briefly. I know we've seen examples already on the national stage of judges using AI with authority to do so. And that doesn't mean they're just blatantly printing or having a ChatGPT produce an order and sign their name at the bottom. There should be doing the similar processes that you described lawyers must do. Where do you see that going for judges' use, be it in research, be it in drafting? Is it comparable to the way lawyers likely would and should use it?
I think it is. And it's interesting because I've actually talked to judges at these different conferences, and some of them were tech conferences, some of them weren't. And they said, I really don't like the idea of lawyers using it, but we found some really interesting ways to use it in my chambers. And so it's so funny because they oftentimes don't want litigants or lawyers using it, but they trust the clerks to, in their law clerks to use it in ways that expedite the ability for them to increase efficiency in terms of what they're doing in chambers and stuff. So they absolutely are using it. I think that, and I know that there are conferences for judges where they talk about this, and I think that they're all realizing because so many of them are backlogged. There's a lot of there often isn't the funding for them to have sufficient staff to do the work that they need to do, and so I think that you're going to see it increasingly being used in that way by them within the court system to both allow them to be more responsive and move their dockets faster, but also just to sort of get rid of some of the grunt work at the beginning, or even to compare I know some people have said that they will upload both sets of briefs and have ChatGPT take the first stab at comparing it, and giving its opinion on which one makes the most sense, or where are the inconsistencies, or which ones do they each get wrong, and then they'll have their clerks dive in, kind of like how I was suggesting that general counsel are using generative AI tools to hone in on the issues before they hand it off to outside counsel to save some money. They're also doing that oftentimes before they hand it off to their clerks to analyze those things, give them a starting point to see if it obviously confirm the accuracy. But it's interesting to see those different use cases, and I think that's absolutely going to impact the way judges run, or the courts are run too.
Yeah. We got about 5 minutes left. One of the questions I saw in the chat mentioned agents. What is this discussion of agents, and is that a newer thing of more recent times since ChatGPT was launched several years ago?
Yeah, no, it's definitely newer. Last year at all the legal tech shows, all the legal tech companies were talking about generative AI integration. That was the big thing that they all talked about, and how they're rolling that functionality out and their plans to do so. This year at Legal Week, which was in New York City at the end of March, that's all anybody talked about. I wear my press hat when I attend some of these conferences. So when I was at Legal Week, I was there not with my company who was also exhibiting there, but I was there wearing a press hat and getting briefings from different tech companies. And that's all that they were talking about, especially the larger ones, the legal research tools that have already rolled generative AI out in a pretty significant way. They're all talking about the fact that they're working on agentic AI to build it into their products to both have this interface. A lot of them have the interface already that makes their products much more user-friendly, because the interface is like a chat interface that gets you to where you need in their products to get the information you need and streamline that access to the information. And then the agentic AI starts to actually do some of the work on the back end. And depending on which product you talk to, they're doing it in different ways. But the idea is that you make a query through the generative AI interface, and it then talks to another generative AI agent, like chatbot, a different chatbot within the system, that then goes out and gets things for you. So instead of just saying, okay, we're taking you to the place where you can do litigation analytics. I'm just going to use Lexis or Lexis because they have litigation analytics. I have nothing to do with Lexis, VLEX, or Thomson Reuters. I have no connection with any of those companies. But the only company I have a connection with is Affinipay, just to be clear. But I want to decide how to approach a memo with this judge on this issue, and it will, like, that inquiry from one chatbot will go to another one. And I think previously would have said, here's the litigation analytics section. I can help you run the query if you'd like. The same chatbot would do that. But this one will hand it off to the other chatbot, tell the chatbot to go. And I'm making this up. I don't recall anyone telling me this. It's just I'm hypothesizing in my head. That chatbot will go off into the litigation analytics tools and look for that particular judge and way that it's handled and provide you that report without you having to request the report. So it's kind of like these chatbots then go off and get the information that you would have first had to know where to go in the system to get it. And then you would have had to enter queries and sort of funnel into the data to get it and then ask it to run reports about it. It'll just do all that. And the chatbot that's the inquiry chatbot, if you will, hands it off to this other chatbot. And so those are the different agents that are talking to each other. And they're all starting to roll out functionality like that. And depending on the kind of software we're talking about, it's different types of agents doing different things.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if we see that in our day-to-day life more and more and more. Your entire workflow, regardless of your industry, is going to be centered around agentic AI very, very soon. If it's not already, and you don't even notice it so far, it's going to get there. I can't forget to mention, Nikki, you spoke on AI at our conference in 2018. I can't believe it's already been 7 years ago. And of course, that was a very different talk than you gave today, rightfully so. So let me ask the question, when you come back 5 or 7 years from now, what talk are you going to be giving on AI, do you think? Or whatever we're going to call AI then? Who knows? What's your prediction?
It's going to be a hybrid conference, and I'm going to be there with like a hologram up on the stage, and AI is going to be like I don't know. It's somehow AI is going to be involved in in running the back end of the conference. I don't know. It'll be interesting to see, but it's certainly going to be agentic AI. AI is going to be embedded in everything we're doing. Hopefully, it will not have taken over the world. I try to welcome my robot overlords on LinkedIn and my legal technology newsletter every Friday. So hopefully they will be kind to humans like me that, if they do take over. So we'll see.
Yeah. Well, if they're going to befriend you, hopefully this conversation will be saved and they'll recognize I'm a friendly to you and likely get the same courtesy back to me. I hope we'll be there together. Nikki, let me close with one final quick question. What's the next thing that our audience can do to get started in AI? If they do nothing else, what can they do today or tomorrow to get started on this?
Pay OpenAI or Anthropic or Google Gemini. Pay them $20 for an account where you can turn off the training data, won't train on your data, and just spend the next month and cancel it when the month's up. But spend the next month understanding what a generative AI can do for you. And then after you really have your head wrapped around that and you really understand the benefits, start learning about what's available in the legal tools that your firm already is using and see what the roadmaps look like, and just start making a plan for how you're going to incorporate it into your work process if that's what you decide to do.
Great. Well, thank you again, Nikki, for your time again, your expertise, and it's always good to see you. Hope to see you again soon. Thanks for sharing what it means for AI in the legal profession and how to do it ethically along the way.